Chuck Eddie's having a fundraiser tomorrow. Anyway, hello everybody. It's Radio Free Eskippakithiki, and you just heard Moondrive with their song "Swallowing a Toad." Before that was Dan Deacon with "ARP 2 Float Away." Probably that's one of those albums where they're annoying about putting the titles with the right things. And before that was Tall, Tall Trees with A Number of Signs. And I'm here with Geoff Young, and we're just going to play some music and talk a little bit about Russia and Russophobia and bail bond reform. And I hear Michael Frazier will be along in just a little bit to hang out with us. So, and also thank you very much to the caller last week. Geoff, you said practically nothing last week, but the one thing you did say is what got us the person calling in. So, yeah. That was pretty cool. So, would you like to share your thoughts about Russia, or
we could start a little of that. Maybe come back to it a couple times. We'll see how it goes.
Well,
how the flow goes today.
Yeah, I'm planning on playing a little bit more music than usual, but we will always see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, on the emotional level, I think all this nonsense about Russia is complete crap. And I feel bad because I don't take people seriously when they talk about it anymore. Like, I wish I could take it seriously. I wish I could, like a lot of people I really respect, like people I know that work in cybersecurity and banking, and people who are very closely connected to politics and who absolutely have my respect, honestly believe that magical Russian memes are pushing our democracy around, when it's clear that our democracy is plummeting straight down a hill and nothing could influence it one way or the other.
Well, I think I need to provide a little background and support that emotional reaction.
Yeah.
I think the idea that Russia meddled in our presidential election in 2016, you have to know that it came out of the Clinton campaign.
Directly from the Clinton campaign.
Immediately after Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and lost the presidency.
Actually, I'll disagree with you a little bit there. They started pushing the Russian meme in May.
May
of that year.
All right. Long before the election.
They were trying to, it was straight out of the Clinton campaign, and they were trying to distract from various things. And they really started pushing it after the election.
Okay.
But it was their way of explaining WikiLeaks. And
right.
People have, the edifice of Russophobia has grown so large that people have forgotten the foundations, to the point where Trump was on that phone call that caused the impeachment. He didn't just call about Hunter Biden; he called about CrowdStrike and Hunter Biden, and everybody's completely forgotten what CrowdStrike was or why he would inquire about it. In fact, I saw them on the news. I was watching the news, and the commentator said, CrowdStrike, helpfully because everybody'd forgotten what it was, said CrowdStrike is a debunked conspiracy theory about the Russian involvement in 2016 election. Which it is.
Isn't CrowdStrike like a corporation? Or okay.
The CrowdStrike Corporation are the people who swore up and down from the very beginning that the Russians were behind
they hacked.
Yeah, that the Russians were behind the hack and the WikiLeaks document drop.
Okay,
and they have been debunked. But
right, and they were debunked
by
some actual intelligence professionals
and computer science professionals,
right, who deduced based on looking at the
metadata.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the metadata?
The metadata.
Yeah. Well,
they deduced that it was not hacked, that the DNC servers and John Podesta's servers, I think, may have been hacked. I don't know.
Well, okay. See, this is the part that I cared about. This is when I was still paying attention.
All right.
So at least 9 nations hacked the DNC servers.
Okay.
Because the DNC servers' security was a joke. And in fact, they've caught the... Oh, there's Michael Frazier. They've caught the... you're going to have to wait a second. No. We'll talk about this and we'll go get him. Well, no, I lost my train of thought. So actually, we'll just play some music and come back to that. All right. right. So sorry, I was slightly thrown off my the speed by the appearance of our friend Michael Frazier in the window, and here's Michael. Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to drag you back to ancient history, but what we were talking about is actually 2016 and the emergence of the Russians done it myth in relation to WikiLeaks. So, and feel free to chime in and disagree with me like you always. But in 2016, the FBI figured, and I don't super trust the FBI, but the FBI figured that the DNC server was hacked by 8 or 9 different governments or governmental agencies. Now, what we know about the FBI now, I no longer believe that, but there's no reason to believe that a government did something just because the FBI said the government did it. But it was hacked a lot. In any case, but you were talking about the metadata and the metadata analysis, which proved that whatever happened with that data, it wasn't hacked from overseas. It certainly wasn't hacked from Romania by Guccifer, who's CrowdStrike, the Guccifer hack is what it's called. But they analyzed the metadata, which makes it sound more complicated than it did. What they did is they just did the basic math. They looked at how big the file was,
Right.
and they looked at how long it took to transfer. And they said, that is not the speed that it takes to transfer something through 3 ISPs and a bunch of cutouts to Romania. That's the speed that it takes to download something onto a USB key.
Yeah.
So,
Otherwise known as a thumb drive.
yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
like, it's certainly possible that it just happened to be a really boring day in Romania and they got an amazing T17 connection or something like that. But it would be the world's wildest coincidence that that thing wasn't just downloaded onto a USB drive, which is exactly what it was. And so I will always remember my friend I always remember the people who were first to things. I'll always remember my friend Josh, who was the first person who was just like, oh my God, they're really going to try to blame this on the Russians. And I went back and I looked at it. It was May 16th, 2016, is when the Clinton campaign started blaming the Russians for things.
Okay, so that was even before the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia,
Very much so, yes.
where the superdelegates threw the nomination to Hillary Clinton and basically
Yeah. Well, the caller last week
cheated
said
Bernie
that,
Sanders
I
out
disagree
of
that it was
the.
the superdelegates. I think it was cheated. It was stolen by that point. Even if they'd had a fair convention with the votes that they had going in, with everything we knew about, like we know for a fact there was something horribly wrong with the 2016 New York City primary or Nevada.
Right.
Or a bunch of other places we
Right.
can name.
Right,
But
right.
by the time the math got to the convention, there was no way. Sanders was just playing out the hand. As I recall it. I don't think the superdelegates really came into it in
No, I think
2016.
I was not in the convention hall, but I was in Philadelphia. I went there
Yeah.
to be outside, with all the protesters. And
Thank you for your service, by the way.
there was the first vote actually went for Sanders. And then they canceled that and went on with the second vote that went the other way.
Well, I have to admit I was a little distracted because my son was being born during that convention.
Yeah.
So,
A little bit of a distraction, but
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
I'm dismayed by your lack of consciousness to your service upon this.
I
on
meant
this
to go back and
particular
read all
issue.
the newspapers. I swear, I was on the edge. So it really was the superdelegates. The first ballot went to Sanders. I
Yeah,
did not know
apparently.
that.
I mean, from what I heard from the delegates coming out,
Really? How could they conceal something like that?
they concealed everything.
Somebody will someday write a book about the 2016 convention, and I will read it.
Yeah.
I'm looking
All
forward
right,
to
so
that.
at any rate, through various means over a period of months, the DNC threw the primary to Clinton,
Yeah.
and then they came up with this RussiaGate theory,
Yeah.
conspiracy theory, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they accuse everybody else of being conspiracy theorists, but what is RussiaGate besides a conspiracy theory?
Well, I'll tell you what it is.
But
it's
this
a
isn't-
low-quality conspiracy theory.
And low quality, right?
Sorry.
But this is distinguished from Russia actually meddling in our elections, right?
I gotta say, like, I held my mind open to that possibility for the longest time. For the longest time, I was like, if I even see the beginnings of proof, I'll absolutely say Russia did at least something. But everything the Mueller report came out with was not just a joke, but a bad joke. Like that St. Louis troll farm, or when they started doing show indictments of people who weren't even in this nation, and then because they thought it was safe, and then the people said they started showing up.
Yeah, they hired some U.S. lawyers.
Yeah.
A Russian company that was accused of doing something.
Mesmeric Rasputin memes.
they hired some U.S. lawyers and said, this indictment is a joke. And here's our denial and our motion to dismiss.
I'm sorry to.
And
I tried
Mueller
for the
dropped it.
time,
He dropped it because he had no evidence against that particular company.
Yeah, he was never supposed to. It was a Hail Mary show indictment.
Now, what do you all think about? I think what was it last week that the DOJ and then the Trump administration sat down with the Sanders campaign.
They already retracted that. They're already walking it back. I'm not even kidding. They're already walking it back.
Another made-up story.
Yeah, every time. And after a while, I'm just like, okay. And there's a couple other things that really stick with me. I mean, to go through them really fast. First is that I'm an American, and I strongly believe that America makes the strongest and the best memes in the world. The fastest, the wittiest, the dumbest, the meanest. I don't believe that Russia can compete.
As somebody that has been consistently part of the libertarian groups, I can honestly say I can verify that to be a fact.
Yeah, I mean it would be like putting a Pinewood Derby car in the Indianapolis 500. There's no chance. It wouldn't even. Yeah. So anyway, so there's that. There's also. And that ties into another issue, which is the other thing that did happen at the exact same time that the Russia thing happened in May 2016 was Clinton decided to blame Pepe the Frog.
What?
Yeah, do you remember when she decided that cartoon frog was the source of all white supremacy and all her troubles?
No.
That came directly from the Clinton campaign.
Yes.
And so that always bothered me because I'm well aware of the Chans. I've always enjoyed the Chans. They are a virulent form of life. But to pretend that Russia could run them any more than anybody else, I mean, the entire Keck thing is fascinating.
Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the attitude of Russian people and Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Russia had no motive to try to influence our 2016 presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian people and Putin himself didn't care who won, Trump or Hillary Clinton. He knew he was going to have to deal with the same empire regardless of who was in the White House. He had no motive. Now, he actually had a strong motive to stay out of it completely.
Yeah.
Everybody,
two strong motives.
Well, I'll list one. You supply the other. Everybody knew that Clinton was going to win. Trump was considered just kind of a throwaway candidate, very weak, outrageous in his words and behavior. So almost everyone predicted her victory.
Yeah.
So Vladimir Putin would have had to be stupid to try to do anything to undercut the person who was going to be the next American president.
Yeah, it's like endorsing Berman Supreme. Like, you'd have to be stupid.
He's not a stupid person. And the Russian intelligence services, the Russian people are not stupid either.
No, they're not. Well, that's the other reason that one of the other reasons. I've got two. But Russia is a nation of chess players.
Okay.
And one of the very first things that any chess player learns is never interrupt your enemy while they're making a mistake.
Right.
And as long as America's doing this to itself, Russia has no need to do anything to us. It would be counterproductive. They're just saving up. At first they were like, okay, I've got a tempo. At this point, they've got like 70 tempos, and they don't know what to do with them all. But as long as we continue to tear ourselves apart over imaginary Russians in our midst, there's absolutely no reason for actual Russians to do anything. It'd be pointless.
So all these claims that Russia is trying to turn Americans against each other and cause an increase in divisiveness are...
We do a good job of that ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We're
do
sitting there holding the petrol and saying, "Oh well, who's dousing us?" when we're
Yeah.
really doing it to each other. So.
Yeah, it's like the Russians are firing an AK-47 into a hurricane, and we're like, well, if they would just stop influencing our hurricane.
And I think that's important to note.
Yeah.
You know, you all talk about Russiagate. I do think that there is a degree of influence, foreign influence into our election.
Foreign, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Russian, no.
I do think that most national security intelligences have confirmed that there has been attempts, more than just attempts, to not only hack our elections, but also to try to find some way to influence it.
Are you talking about AIPAC or just like people that don't have official lobby groups?
Official lobby groups, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, everybody is trying to influence our election.
But the one thing
Right.
I wanted to note is that I keep on hearing that we live in the most divisive times ever.
Yeah.
I highly disagree with that. I think we've always been in this degree of divisiveness. It's just we have more mediums now to actually showcase and bring
Yeah.
it out to the light.
Okay.
All of these divisions have always been here. It's just that, one, we have more fuel to gaslight things with.
Yeah.
Two, we're becoming more open with social media, having more mediums to be able to actually feature things, so it's constantly in our face.
Yeah.
So I think that it's creating this cycle, this system of where we're reinforcing that we're divisive, and that's what's giving it an increase, an increased hypersensitivity when we go and look into our politics and our everyday lives, and people saying we're living in the most divisive times.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, people saying, well, where did all this new racism and homophobia come
Yeah.
from? And I'm just sitting back going,
No.
where the hell have you all been?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
been
There's
there.
no good old
It's
days.
been here.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
we just have new ways to feature it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like the Princess
Right.
and the Pea now.
What?
Well, no, that's a bad example
Princess
because the
and the-
princess was complaining about nothing. But we have the ability to see these little injustices now. We're focusing in.
So back to influence on U.S. elections.
Yeah.
It's been studied and reported in political science, peer-reviewed papers again and again and again, that the main influence on U.S. elections is the power of money,
Yeah.
both in terms of which candidate has the most money to spend, and more important even than that is where the corporate interests direct their support.
Yeah.
The U.S. elections are influenced primarily by our 1%, our oligarchs, our billionaires, whatever you want to call them, our corporations. The whole corporate sector decides U.S. elections, and the people have almost no effect
Yeah.
on either elections or the policies that the new or old government implements. So that one factor, the power of corporate money, overwhelms everything else. Now then you've got very powerful lobby groups, such as the Israeli lobby, which now consists mainly of AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and CUFI, to get the Christian side of the market, Christians United for Israel. And those two groups work together, and there are dozens of other smaller groups that all go along like a herd. Israeli lobby is very powerful. Saudi Arabian lobby is very powerful.
Yeah.
British, Ukrainian, those are the countries that actually meddle or influence our elections. So number one, corporate power, far bigger influence than anything else. Two, those four countries that have decided that the way to get their goals achieved in the world in their own
You think it's
region.
limited to those four? Or, I mean,
No,
China.
no,
yeah,
no, no.
okay,
There's plenty
yeah.
of other. There's Taiwan. There's all kinds of other. There's Japan.
Mhm.
But you don't see Japan openly supporting a candidate. And you've got AIPAC. You have Benjamin Netanyahu invited to address Congress,
Yeah.
invited by one party.
Yeah.
Basically we have two parties, invited by one party, not invited by the president.
Are you talking about? Didn't that happen during the
I think it was
run?
John
Yeah,
Boehner.
John Boehner. Yeah, because I remember that. That was do you know what Boehner got for that?
No.
The Pope. That was his trade.
He
agreed
got
to
the
put
Pope,
Netanyahu-
and then the Pope declined to support him,
Yeah, that was
and
funny.
he soon resigned
Yeah,
from
But
from the speakership.
without yeah, that's true. Well, he'd been drinking a lot, but without distracting too much. Yeah, there's major lobbies, and I mean I don't
Right.
honestly see the major difference between. I feel that other nations have the right to have a say in our affairs to a
Right.
certain degree. I mean,
Because we
need to
certainly
listen.
affect
Yeah.
them.
If we're going to be world policemen,
Yeah.
You
If we're going to meddle in any election we feel like from 1945 until the present day,
yeah.
then we need to expect that other countries are going to try to influence us.
Well, I don't want to be
But-
too rude because I know Michael has a bill that he really wants to talk about.
Okay,
but,
let's
but no, I
change
like I
topic.
really
No,
want
this is fascinating.
I want to touch on
So-
this because this is something I looked up this week.
Okay.
As you may know, I care about history very deeply, and this is not the first outbreak of Russophobia in American history. This is actually the fifth major outbreak of Russophobia, where for some reason everybody just decided that Russia was doing it. Russia was doing something terrible, and
What
they weren't
domino
sure what.
are we on at this point?
Well, this is the other four times they were wrong. Like Russia in the 50s they were busy, dealing with Stalin being dead mostly. Russia in the World War I certainly couldn't have cared less about us. Russia in the 1860s actually intervened on our side. Russia is the main reason that England and France didn't, and Spain. I should be more clear, but I can't remember exactly which one. But they all had designs on San Francisco, and the only allies that we had, the Union had in the Civil War, were the Russians. Imperial Russians and the Republic of San Marino were the only allies. And did they court the Republic of San Marino. That was such a big deal to them. But Imperial Russia came in on the side of Abraham Lincoln because Cassius Clay, who lived right around here, went to Russia and was a gosh darn good ambassador. And the Russians blockaded, not only did the Russians blockade San Francisco for us, which stopped all the various European powers that really wanted California from having any sort of toehold over there, but they also made the deal to buy Alaska. That's why we have Alaska, is because of the close relationship between America and Russia in the 1860s. Directly, Seward, Lincoln's Secretary of State. That was his thing. That was his deal. And then before that, I think it was the 1810s or the American Revolution. I forget whether it was the War of 1812 or the American Revolution, but we were convinced the Russians were up to something. That's way dim in the past. I'd like to read a book about that one. But so this is the fifth major outbreak. And there have been other times, like in 1970. This is funny. I just looked it up this week. In 1976, the Russians intervened in our election. Do you know what they did?
No.
They tried to support Gerald Ford because they thought Jimmy Carter was too into the UN.
That doesn't even make sense.
No, well, why would it make sense?
I'm not sure that incident is true.
Okay, and then it goes on. In 1980, they decided that Reagan was bad news, so they tried to stop Reagan.
Okay, well, what did they do?
That's a really good question because the articles didn't say. I mean, obviously they didn't release memes because it was the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
They said they supported primary opponents with fundraising, with funding. But yeah, I'd like to have more details on what this stuff is and what they did.
Well,
Whatever they did, it didn't work.
If it happened,
Yeah.
it didn't work. And if it happened, all right, so I like numbers, so I'm going to say if the corporate sector affects our elections, say, give it the number 1,000.
Yeah.
All right, then all of these lobbies, foreign lobbies that we talked about, all together might add another 200.
Yeah, if that
Okay.
much. I mean, okay, you're talking about all foreign lobbies. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
All of
Yeah.
them added together.
Yeah.
So corporate influence far outweighs anything else. And then Russia is down there at 2.
Yeah.
You got 1,202.
Well, it's an efficiency issue too, because it's so hard to get people to do anything over a language barrier.
Yeah.
You know, and being a native speaker and not being a native speaker is instantly noticeable to anybody. Even if
Right.
you're dumb as a rock, anybody can tell if you don't speak English as a first language, even when you're writing.
Yep.
It just shows. It just comes through. Like I saw the Russian memes, and you could tell right away they were made by somebody who didn't speak English. So you're losing efficiency in your persuasion right off the top. Like you're at 10%, 5% efficiency to what somebody who actually understood the culture was. And we can't understand, they can't understand us and we can't understand them because they're such completely separate cultures.
Oh, I should mention that I'm including the mass media corporations along with
Yeah.
the other corporations.
And they would very much like to tell us what
they
to do.
go together, right. They have tremendous influence on elections. Mass media corporations, plus the corporations that own them, and all of their friend corporations.
Yeah,
They basically decide who's going to win.
I mean, I think they'd like to. I think they want to. I think they're trying to, but I think that what's happening right now is essentially out of their control. Like, I do think
so.
that.
What's happening right now?
Well, not just Sanders, but it's happening across the board. Insurgent candidates are doing very well, pretty much everywhere. It's going to be a good year for underdogs.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, we'll see who actually brings home the offices in May, but you know, it's already being a very unusual. I mean, like Chris Matthews is on the edge of losing his job because he said some incredibly, astoundingly stupid things.
Usually that doesn't matter.
Screw that guy. Yeah, exactly. Normally Chris Matthews would, he has tenure. He'd be there forever. But now he's in bad trouble, and MSNBC is openly talking about getting more pro-Bernie announcers, which scares the crap out of me, and I'm totally against it. But
Because you like Bernie.
the way that control is exerted on a culture is gradual and steady.
Right.
They don't slam on the brakes. They keep the brakes on maximum all the time. So anytime you see any sort of movement, you know it's already a little bit out of control. And I am strongly convinced that they have already done everything they can to stop Sanders. I'm convinced they're out of ammunition. They're out of ideas. They
Right.
simply don't have the gas to keep fighting.
That might be true.
And I mean, like
I guess
Michael.
we'll see in a couple of weeks on Super Tuesday.
Yeah, it does sound super, doesn't it? I mean, I don't see any way they can stop him now. I don't want to get overconfident, but I mean, they're not going to suddenly manufacture Biden supporters. You're not going to just like stamp them out of soap. Like, they don't exist.
And someone at the DNC says, "Hold my beer. Hold on."
Did you see what Biden did yesterday?
I really don't
Yeah,
focus
I
my
saw
attention
that.
to Joe Biden.
I've been falling off the wagon and paying attention to national. Nobody told me that we were going to start winning. I mean, it was very easy to stay out of national politics when we were losing all the time. But no, Biden apparently went on stage yesterday and said, "I'm Joe Biden and I'm running for Senate, and you can also vote for the other Joe Biden."
He did?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
pretty close to a
what
direct
I
quote.
read was that he said to Sanders, if you're the nominee, I'm going to support you.
Yeah, he's done. He
That's
doesn't
what
want to run anymore.
That's what I read. I didn't read the other thing.
Oh no, this just happened last night. But yeah,
Oh.
I don't think Biden wants to run anymore, and I think that a lot of his support is going to go to Sanders. But I mean, my point is just they're completely out of gas. They don't have any ideas or the money to execute them if they did.
Well, Bloomberg has some money.
Yeah.
No, no way.
So I think we're about to test that. I mean, how much do you trust a rich person when they say how rich they are? By the way, is Donald Trump a billionaire? He's not a billionaire.
I have
right?
no idea.
Somebody said he was.
He probably is.
No one
but
knows.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
guess so.
That's one of the issues that was brought up in
It's top secret.
2015 and 2016.
National security will keep that under wraps.
We have a story about that. Do you remember what our friend, the banker, told us about that? We have a friend who, I guess we should. Did he tell us in confidence or not? I remember he was all hush hush about it. But we have a friend who works for Deutsche Bank, and he said that they had a special seminar where they got together and they all agreed to never give Donald Trump any money for anything ever. I mean, and this was well before he ran for president. It's just because he's such a grifter, in fairness. I mean, everybody that goes anywhere near him ends up bankrupt. So.
He could be a billionaire. He could be negative $1 billion. Like, net.
Yeah.
1 billion more than he owns. That's possible.
We
Whatever.
shouldn't speculate too much about Donald Trump.
Doesn't
That
matter.
is an uninteresting topic.
Right.
So,
Speaking of speculation,
please do.
I have to ask, have you all seen the article written by the Herald Leader editorial board regarding the University of Kentucky?
No, what happened?
No.
The headline is 9 pages or 15,000 after 4-year legal battle, UK turns over clinical records to Herald Leader.
9 pages?
They initially fought them in court. The University of Kentucky fought them in court.
It's an open
released
records
9
thing,
pages,
right? Yeah.
And then the Herald Leader picked up the case and sued the university, where the courts recently came back and said, you all cannot disclose just 9 pages. You will have to disclose 15,000 pages.
Because they were pretending originally there were only like 9 pages or something, right?
Right. And this is in regards to the university, particularly the healthcare enterprise here, having to return $4 million back to the federal government because of a cardiology clinic it acquired in Hazard. Some sort of kerfuffle there.
Huh.
But I think it's interesting. There's a pretty powerful quote here about a disturbing trend here at the university, that while UK does positively and quickly turn over about 90% of the numerous information requests it receives every year, it has had a persistent adversarial role in regards to transparency on some of the most important issues here, including most famously that hit national news suing our school paper over sexual assault processes here.
Wait,
at
they
the
refused
university.
they refused to release information on sexual assault.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah, sued our school paper.
They-
But there's a
they sued the colonel.
yeah, sued the colonel.
My God.
That's
How did that turn out?
not too well. Fayette Circuit Court ruled in favor of the university, but the Court of Appeals, in a very, very hard-hitting fashion, said absolutely not, that the university,
Yeah.
despite what it might think in everyday situations, is a public entity fueled by taxpayer,
Yeah.
created by the General Assembly.
What do they think they are? The Democratic Party? No. This is
But here's the pretty powerful quote. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it took me a second to bring it up. The university's position is novel, but we do not find any authority supporting the decision, says within the court. Indeed, there is no dispute that the university took its final action based upon the information revealed during the audits. Records which are of internal, preliminary, and investigational nature lose their exempt status once they are adopted by the agency as part of its action.
Yeah.
And that's part of the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court, Kentucky Supreme Court, declined to hear the case. But the editorial board went on to speak about the trend here at the university. Quote, there are larger principles at stake than the fate of one clinic. In recent cases, UK has argued that it is above the law, above the private scrutiny of the Attorney General, and above the public interest. It is difficult to understand this recalcitrance, which not only keeps what could be short-lived controversies in the public eye for years, but makes President Eli Caputo's claims of openness and transparency look hollow.
Yeah.
We've seen the same stubbornness in a far more serious case, that of the student newspaper, the Kentucky Colonel, and its quest to uncover the truth about the abuse of students in a sexual harassment case involving a professor. The Colonel is also represented by Miller, who's also doing the UK transparency case here. I thought that was a pretty powerful quote by the editorial board of the Herald Leader talking about the universities. And quite frankly, it speaks upon a trend that I think that should be noted. It should be noted by the public, particularly about sort of what the universities do view themselves, that they're immune to public scrutiny, but they will always go to the General Assembly and hold out their hand and say, give us more money.
Yeah.
Anyway. Now, to be fair, I do want to read the university's response. Mr. Jay Blanton, who's the director of PR.
Please do.
So he says that, of course, that the university does agree that they complied, that they do take the public interest seriously, including pointing out again that without question and more than not, and I'm quoting here, that they very quickly turn over about 90% of any open records request. He does go on to say that the university is a public agency. It is their legal obligation and responsibility to be transparent. And he does note that they do have a small staff dealing with this, but I'll be honest, I think that's a BS response.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you only need a large staff for this stuff if you're trying to redact it.
But there's something I found to be very interesting in this quote from the university about that, quote, more often than not, far more than not, the Herald Leader and us agree. That's a fact. In those cases where we're on opposite sides, it is simply a matter of respectful disagreement over where the line should be drawn between full disclosure of records and the need to protect the privacy of victims, patients, and the right of attorney-client privilege and preliminary recommendations and work product.
They know they got caught. They know they got caught.
Yeah,
hard.
I have to say, one, I when I read this quote, I put my head down for the university in embarrassment that, one, they just threw their students and exploited them as a way to cover up what could be the things that they're trying to hide.
Yeah, how many students were in a clinic in Hazard again? But yeah, I mean, okay, yeah.
Well, the student notion is about the Kentucky Colonel case. And what they did is went on this giant marketing tour to try to win the court of public opinion regarding to try to find a way to get out of releasing documents, the ending results of sexual assault cases here on professors, so that students might know if their professor might have a history of sexually assaulting people or harassing.
Yeah, that's dark.
But, at the end of the day, I can't think of a better example of a PR line to say trying to save our own butts and use their students as a way to try to garnish some sort of public sympathy by exploiting its students.
Yeah, to just dodge behind that real fast. I mean, when you say they were running a clinic in Hazard that went out of business under shady circumstances, and now they don't want to release the records.
Well, they had to return $4 million back to the federal government.
Yeah, it sounds like
for reasons unknown.
It sounds like some good old Eastern Kentucky Medicaid fraud. That's obviously where my mind goes first, but I don't know that for sure. But
But that's the point. The reason why is that that's again speculation.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why that we have to have these open, transparent things is to ensure that, one, the public mind doesn't wander. Yeah. And then two, so that we can have a direct knowledge about what our taxpayer money and what the university has called itself the indispensable institution of Kentucky.
Wouldn't it be transy?
That sounds a little. That sounds a little.
That sounds like not a tobacco farm.
I love the University of Kentucky, and I really do.
Yeah.
But what I do not love, it's BS, and that's one of it.
Well, I mean, I grew up around here, and I mean at UK. Actually, I mentioned this a lot, but my first job ever was right there, like literally where I'm pointing right now. In this building. I worked here when I was 15. My father still works at the University of Kentucky Chemistry Department, and My mother was a big part of the medical research staff here. So I love UK. I also have no student relationship to UK whatsoever. Like, I keep forgetting that this is technically a student radio station and that there might be a student listening to it. It has, to me, University of Kentucky is an institution. It's part of the city.
A bunch of professors as well.
Yeah, I know some
Yeah.
professors, so I hang out with professors. So yeah, that's a different issue. But the students, they just come and go. And I should have more sympathy for the "it's all for the students" rhetoric. I just don't see it that way, and I wish I did, but that's not the experience I've ever had here. But okay. So the University of Kentucky is
Well, that's a pretty powerful quote from the Herald Leader Board, and this article was published. Let's see. Let me pull up the exact date. It was published by the Herald Leader editorial board on February 21st.
It sounds very much like that UK saw a copy before, or they were asked for a comment. They were like, "Oh crap," and they turned around real fast.
Oh yeah, this
But
was definitely
so
a Friday news dump.
University of Kentucky is a constitutional organ of the state of Kentucky. Absolutely.
Yes, it is a child of the state.
It's
It
not-
is created by the state and privileged to exist by the state.
It's not the only child, but it is a child of the state. Okay, so with that in mind, what would you consider to be worthy of withholding from transparency? What could happen at the University of Kentucky that you would think should be redacted?
So I think that there are, and I will give Jay Blanton some credit in the University of Kentucky. Student privacy is something that should absolutely be protected. Those records.
So the names of victims of crimes.
The names of victims, and then also the victims of sexual assault. But I think that that's a pretty wide breadth that they're going into. Is
Well, they tossed
how-
attorney-client privilege in there very carefully. Yeah,
Right.
I'm not.
which I'm going to call out that universities, not just UK but all over Kentucky, has had this nasty little trick of where that they put a attorney on every board and every committee, so that if somebody tries to request the records, they say, "Oh, well, one of our attorneys was on it, attorney-client privilege. We're invoking that."
That makes me want to go to law school. That's fantastic. Yeah, I figured something like that was going on.
It's a pretty
Yeah.
dirty little trick, and people are taking notice of it. That's the reason why quite a few of our members of our General Assembly is actually looking at greater transparency laws for our universities, particularly when it. I think Bobby McCool out of Wolfe County is actually doing something in regards to discretionary funding and being more transparent about that as well.
Okay, so
So there's a whole entire issue that people are taking notice, and this is what I think that is so important to notice, that the universities have created this bubble for themselves, and it has just expanded to the point that now everybody's saying we have a bit of a mess on our hands.
well, if you toss the student loan crisis on top of it,
That
and
too.
What tuition costs, you've got a tripartite mess.
And I think that for places around here as well, is that we always hear we always hear about the budget cuts, but the question that everybody asks is, okay, we adequately fund the universities.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what we do now, but I'm saying, what if we do it? Will it actually be enough? Will it actually ever be enough? And frankly, here at UK, tuition has went up 1,000% over, I think, 10 years.
But that's with no
Wow.
greater increase in services, so it's not like they're spending; they're keeping it. A lot of it's going to
Well,
different
they
middlemen.
would.
But
I think that if I had to speculate a retort from the universities, is that they would say, well, no, we have expanded and gave greater services, one such as counseling, also student activities,
this lovely new building,
dorms, this wonderful new. Well, this building was mostly paid by private donations.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Oh, that's charming.
Bill Gatton gave millions of dollars.
But we're not going to be like it's.
Hence
10
why
times.
we're WRFL is located in the Bill Gatton Student Center.
I had not noticed that. Well, thank you, Bill Gatton, whoever you are. It's very nice. I like this office much better than the old one. But what I'm trying to say is, like, they didn't buy another 9 UKs for raising the price by a factor of 10. Like, maybe another 2, maybe another 3. Some money did trickle down, but for the most part. Okay, but this also comes back to transparency, because this is something I happen to know a little bit about. Like I said, the students of UK, I often forget they're here. and I'm pretty sure that most of the people that are listening to us now are residents of Lexington. But the University of Kentucky Chemistry Department brings in an enormous amount of money, more than the football department does, or more than the athletics department does, with basic patents. Basic patents on basic research, which they license and they sell for an enormous amount of money, and bring in an enormous amount of money for the school. Now, if something, as the court said there, if something is part of an audit, if the University of Kentucky is using information to make a decision, that information becomes public, just as if it was entered into the legal record. If something's part of this public organization's public reasoning, then the facts that underlie the reasoning must be public. So therefore, anything that is used by this organization to make a decision is public, and it's a university. Its job is to increase public knowledge. Does that mean that I should be able to call up the chemistry department and use public records or an open records request to get a patent? If the University of Kentucky discovers something, is it automatically entered into the public record?
That's getting into the weeds. I think that
it's an expensive question, so I already know the
answer. It definitely is.
Yeah, nobody's given up that amount of money, but
and then that also goes into the fundamental aspects of copyright and patent law.
Yeah, but it does seem to me that the logical answer is no. Anything they come up with is public. When they any discovery that they make anywhere in the University of Kentucky should be public immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that would be an expensive decision, so it's not going to get made.
And then my take on this is that for things of public interest like finances, policies, procedures, and while the Open Records Act does make an exemption for this, I would even say preliminary notes. I would highly say
Show
should
your
be
work.
part of public record to see how in the world did you arrive to some of these half-brain decisions and schemes. And that's not equipped towards the University of Kentucky. It's just, I'm just saying in general that we have known that public entities, bureaucracies, what have you, have some sort of crazy rule that comes out, and we all sit back, usually after a court challenge, and go, how in the world did you arrive here? And frankly, it could honestly be used to trace back to figure out what the true intent behind some of these policies are. But I thought that here at the University of Kentucky, the article is pretty powerful, and that quote in general is pretty powerful. And I think it puts not only Eli Capilouto, but we also have to think the Board of Trustees here govern the University of Kentucky and is supposed to manage Eli Capilouto and his administration.
Mm-hmm.
That's not only a reflection, and while it doesn't mention the Board of Trustees, it is also a reflection of the Board of Trustees here too.
Yeah.
And after this and quite a few things going on here at the university, I have to say I'm quite concerned about the processes here at UK.
Fair enough. Oh, by the way, this is 88.1 WRFL, UK's official radio station. This is obviously all our opinions, and is not an official opinion of UK. But does UK have any other radio station besides WRFL?
There's WUKY, which is NPR.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Right?
Whoever's listening along.
Yeah,
When WUKY starts criticizing you, then you're in real trouble. Right now. So I have an article that I'd like to read, and you have some very important information to share. So which you want to do first?
We'll do your article.
Okay. This is about the other major thing that we've been talking about, which is about bail bond reform. And it's a little bit long, but this is about Cuyahoga County in Ohio, where two people have done something that I'm looking very hard at doing in Winchester. That's something I'd very much like to do in Kentucky. Okay, when Anthony Body walks into the Cuyahoga County Public Defender's office on Lakeside Avenue, he cheerfully waves to the receptionist and heads into the back of the building to pick up today's stack of referrals. This is morning routine. The legal office is one of the places where Mr. Body scouts local defendants who are being held in the jail across the street, awaiting their chance to see the judge. He thumbs through the sheaf of papers, tucking the referrals under his coat, and heads to the Justice Center, where the bulk of his day will be spent. Body works with the Bail Project. He was hired in June 2019 to help give a more immediate shape to the argument for reform. He's a bail disruptor. What they do is they go in. Here, I'll just describe it. In the Justice Center, in courtroom 12A, each morning and each afternoon, the county's 34 judges process felony arraignments like a livestock auction. This is where we see the first appearance docket, a tool set up in 2016 to expedite all the things that need to happen before an actual trial. In Kentucky, this would be pre-trial. Judges rotate through this duty day to day, so a defendant can never be quite sure which judge will be setting their bail. On December 2nd, it's Judge John O'Donnell. He reads cash bail amounts into the record, addressing orange jumpsuits on the in-house monitor. He's doing this over a camera. In order to speed the process, the defendants aren't even appearing in court, and several plainclothes individuals in the courtroom. These are people who were arrested only days earlier who haven't been convicted of anything. For example, a 22-year-old Mayfield Heights man is called forward on a concealed weapons felony charge. Bail is set as $5,000. Case management hearing is next week. Is in 1 week. Next. Bail set at $2,500. Case management hearing in 1 week. Next. After the arraignments, gathering his names, Mr. Body retreats to a table in the Justice Center's high ceilings atrium. He leafs through the referrals from earlier in the morning, getting a sense of who might need his help the most. He checks the defendant's priors. He balances the dollar amount of their bail against his organization's capacity to pay. He notes the risk level of their possible failure to appear in court, a sliding scale determined by the public defender's office. In other words, this guy has the full participation of everybody in the legal system. He's addressing a systemic problem. He's not... as much as I love protesting, he's not protesting. He's not angry at one person in particular. He's not blaming anyone. He's working with the entire system to get people bail. Because all these people that he's talking about, case hearing in a week, if they don't have $2,500, and they don't, they're just going to be sitting in jail for a week. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it is. So he goes through, the public defender comes up with a sliding scale that shows the risk level of their possible failure to appear in court. Some names come with a long history of violent episodes or a concerning degree of recidivism. They just don't touch those. And then the other ones are first-timers in the annals of the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. Do they have kids at home? Do they have a job? How long have they been in jail? Where's home? Much of that information is on the page, helping Mr. Body hone his approach. For any open questions, the bail disruptors have their work cut out for them. By the end of the morning, he's whittled that original list to 6 possible cases. 6 inmates eligible for the sorts of services he provides. The next stop is the county jail, housed in the same building, where he'll work and get those people everything he can to get them out of jail. I'm going to cut the rest of it short, but that's 6 people a day. Mm-hmm. They've got 34 judges working in shifts to push people through this system as if they were making hamburgers. And this guy, with all he can do, is managing to spring 6 people a day. Economically, it's all upside down, but this is, I think, very possible. I think this is very possible and very plausible to do right here in Kentucky. I think it's legal. Mm-hmm. I don't see any reason you can't do that. Anybody can pay bail for anybody, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to pay the full amount here in Kentucky. You have to pay 10%. Absolutely nobody's a flight risk in the modern day and age. You can't get away. Nobody's going anywhere. I mean, it's just ridiculous that these people are being kept in jail for the amounts of money that they're being kept for, because the court can ask any amount it wants, right? $5,000. I can just look at you and say, give me $5,000 or you can't leave this room.
Well, there are caps for excessive bail, but the issue is that assumes that, one, that they have a private attorney that is focusing on this case.
Yeah.
And that they're all noticing it. And then 2, there are judges out there that systemically enforces excessive bails.
Yeah.
And so attorneys are afraid to actually raise the point. There's a whole entire issue with the system, but I have to say, this is, here in Kentucky, keeping people in jail is one of the main economic hubs, especially in rural Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you
but
do
it's
have
not
a
working
system.
that well. I mean, that's the thing is they think that it's bringing them money, but the fact that it's bankrupting all these counties is a pretty clear sign that in the long run it's not.
But not only that, they're out there saying, well, we're having, I think that counties are finally realizing the effect of felony disenfranchisement and the economic effect, and that's the reason why we're seeing a surge of that come out recently that counties are going, oh goodness, well, people are out. We put them in jail and got our 30 pieces of silver.
33.361, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
And now they're out. We don't know what to do with them because we can't find them jobs because no one will hire a felon for somebody that just had a dime bag of pot, and we have ruined their life for about 4 years.
Oh yeah, felony theft. I mean, and
You know,
when you add this to plea
PFO
bargaining
charges
justice,
as well.
yeah,
Persistent felony offender.
when you have a cattle call is a good way to look at it. When you have a cattle call pretrial, what they're doing is they're just slapping people with like, we'll drop half this if you plead to the other half. So you end up with a lot of people who, if they actually went to court, wouldn't have anything at all, walking around with a felony, especially because there's very little information about the legal system out there. There's very little legal information about the legal system that's given to people. It's not taught in schools. I mean, you can go to law school, but they say ignorance of the law is no excuse. And then we have this judge in Louisville who does the deep dive and says, you know what, I can't actually find anywhere in the law that it says that we have to obey these traffic signs. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if the
there's no law for speed limits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we were talking about that case a couple weeks ago where
No
the
specific
where the
speed
legislator was sitting right in front of the judges saying like, oh yeah, this is the week before you showed up, because it was the one where Sarah Combs was the dissenting judge. Like the legislator who wrote the law was sitting right in front of the judges saying like, this was the intent of the law. And the judges are like going like, it's the strangest thing. I see him and his mouth is moving, but I hear nothing. I have no idea. So, I mean, if even the judges don't know the law, and they don't, and how could they? Because there's a lot of laws. How can ignorance of the law be no excuse? Anyway, so yeah, these people are getting ground into the system.
But it's something that you talked about, sort of people being pushed through courts like cattle and herd of animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I even noticed. My mom, she went to jail when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
First time drug offender, and like every other family in Eastern Kentucky, it was right at the rise of the opiate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
10 years before everybody else noticing, because it started impacting wealthier people in the cities.
Yeah.
Yep. But, in that time, I remember distinctively sitting in a court in Pound County, me and my grandmother, and at that time, I thought it was just us. I'll give a little credit to myself about, my age. Of course, you're going to think, why is this happening to us?
Mm-hmm.
But I distinctively remember going to that courtroom and sitting down in a packed room with standing, full of families, grandmothers with their grandchildren, and looking around and seeing the line of defendants just being processed for arraignment.
Mm-hmm.
The next time, processed for a status hearing, in and out, in and out. And I have to say that's probably a perfect representation, that being processed like animals, like a factory, going in and out.
Well, that's exactly what that's exactly what a prison industrial complex is. It's you're turning people into animals so that you can extract the bare minimum economics out of them.
And it's cold.
Yeah.
I think that it's not necessarily the fault of some of the people that's in the system that to be desensitized, but I do think that the system itself desensitizes.
Although I enjoy the accurate apportionment of blame as much as anybody, emphasis on fault, especially when you're dealing with systems that you can clearly see predate your birth. I mean, this is where I diverge from a lot of liberals, but I feel that nobody is responsible for anything that happened before they were born or after they die. I really feel like our responsibility is bounded by our lives, and I don't think it's useful in this particular case to apportion blame. Like, I'm talking about doing this in Winchester. I know the jailer in Winchester. He's a good guy. He's doing his absolute best in an impossible situation. They're forcing him to keep 6 people in a 2-person room. So it becomes a study in what people do under impossible pressure in an organizational context.
Yep.
There's no way that he can rationally fulfill his duties. The police officers, as far as they're concerned, are not doing anything wrong. They're simply enforcing the laws. They're going out. They're doing their job. They're supporting their jobs. Bail is set by the legislator. As far as the judge is concerning, not only is the judge doing a great job, he's doing it so fast. He's setting speed records. Look how quickly he's working. So it's the system that's the problem here. Like you can't, even if you could find the guy who thought it was a good idea to set bail at $5,000, he's been dead of old age for years.
Well, this goes back to whether the war on drugs was a good idea.
Wasn't.
I'm against it.
I don't think it was.
No.
Despite some commentary in my home region, the war on drugs is a failure.
Yeah.
Drugs won.
It's a lot of the people who are being shoved through this system every day are addicted.
Yeah.
So are we going to blame and prosecute and imprison addicts? Some of them are happy being addicts, but a lot of them
if you put them in jail, they're not going to do anything but do more drugs anyway. And if they can't keep drugs out of jail, then exactly how is a jail a drug treatment program? No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It was...
So the larger context of this problem is the failure of the war on drugs, a failure of prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
It failed once with alcohol. And the United States at that point was flexible enough to decide, no, this didn't work. We are going to repeal that amendment to the Constitution that made alcohol illegal.
Yeah, they turned right around on that. That was, a 10, 12 period that amendment was in effect? Do you think, but it wouldn't take an amendment to the Constitution to stop the war on drugs, would it?
No,
it
wouldn't.
It would be simply repeal of the scheduled classifications.
Right, that could be done by the U.S. Congress.
You mentioned something last week that I was thinking about. What would you think about the idea of requiring prisoners to be paid minimum wage?
For any labor they do.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
I really am very, very strong on that issue. I think that if you're a working body, you should be paid no matter what circumstance you're in. That's exploiting the person for the situation that they're in. Yes, should somebody that has been sentenced and convicted of a crime be punished? Absolutely. But why is that commingled into another area about trying to rehabilitate, which is also the other part of the purposes of correctional facilities and restorative justice?
Well, nobody believes that, and it's not in the law. I mean, is it in the law? Does it say anywhere in the law that this is
an important aspect of why we have prisons and also have convictions itself.
Well, it's a religious belief. It's a matter of faith that many people have. It's a complex issue of faith that by incarcerating people for a certain amount of time, they will magically turn into, I don't know what they want.
Well, it varies by state and probably by county as to how much rehabilitation is attempted and how much of it, how effective it is. And in some counties, I'm thinking of that sheriff in Arizona, he didn't even give lip service to rehabilitation.
Oh, Arpaio.
Yeah.
Boy, what a dreadful human being. Until Harvey Weinstein reared his head, he was my least favorite human being in the world.
Who is this?
Joe Arpaio, the absolutely dreadful sheriff of Maricopa County. I can tell a story about. I encountered one of his deputies once. And it was one of the most shockingly racist things I've ever experienced in my life.
You met a deputy?
We were driving through Maricopa County in 2009, and I was with a bunch of hippies. We were leaving the New Mexico gathering, and we were on our way to San Diego, and we were driving through Maricopa County, and on the side of the road, on the interstate, we see a van with a bunch of young Mexican people standing around it. The van's broken down by the side of the road and the tire's off, and they're all wearing tuxedos and wedding dresses. And so we stopped and we're like, do you need some help? Is there anything that we can do to help you? And they were like, no, we finally got a hold of somebody. We've been out here all day. And I'm like, what do you mean you've been out all day? It's Arizona. It's July. You've been out here all day? And they're like, yeah, we've been out here all day. Nobody will stop and help us. We're out of water. And we're like, okay, well, here's some water. And they're like, yeah, we were on our way to a wedding. They're a freaking wedding party.
Yeah.
And they had a flat tire, and they were stopped by the side of the road for hours with people just driving by and driving by and driving by. And so we stopped and gave them water. We got off and we drove away, and instantly a cop appears behind us. And the lights come on, and he pulls us over. And we're like, what's going on? It's like, why did you stop for those people? And we're like, well, they're on the side of the road. And he's like, yeah, I know. I've been watching them for hours.
Oh, wow. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's when, I mean, this leads to some other things and something we touched on last week, but it's like, no, you know what? No one really knows what anybody else goes through in this life, and no one can ever experience the sort of prejudice that other people go through. But on a general level, you can see it. You can tell. Like,
Right.
I was well before Philandro Castile was killed. I was well aware something was wrong in Minneapolis. I was well aware that stop and frisk was bad. And actually, I was stopped and frisked. There was something terribly wrong at the border. There's something terribly wrong in Maricopa County in 2009. Maybe their hearts have healed since then. You know, I don't have to be Latino to know that all those Border Patrol checkpoints are racist as hell. And I was so proud of Greyhound for finally standing up to ICE and saying they can't do immigration checks on the buses anymore. Have you ever been through one of those?
Mm-mm.
Boy, you want to know what it's like to be in Germany in the 1930s. You're sitting on a bus and a bunch of heavily armed cops come on and start making all the dark-skinned people show papers. And I'm not exaggerating. You know, that is exactly what happens. This is exactly how it goes down. And then they take some of them away, and you can't do anything about it. And then they get off the bus again with whoever they've decided to take, and you just drive to the next stop. And that's
Wow.
exactly what fascism is. I mean, that's what fascism looks like. It's not dramatic.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's fascism.
Yeah, so I didn't have to actually be dragged off the bus to know that something terrible was going on there.
You needed to have a little empathy.
Yeah, I don't even think that much. I think any of the dumbasses who comment on articles on the Herald Leader website, I think any of them, you put them on that bus, they'd be like, wait a second. Put their MAGA hats on backwards. Like, it would change everything. If any Kentuckian had been through the border. Like, there's a reason why the border has all been voting solidly, screamingly Democratic the entire time that Trump's been around. It's because they know. They've been through it. Everybody in Kentucky is like, build a wall. They have no idea because they've never even been to Texas. There already is a wall everywhere that a human being can get through. It's an impressive wall. I mean, it's enormous. It's got multiple layers and multiple layers of wire over it, and it's on both sides of a river. And in order to get through it, you've got to sit there for hours. And and then the Border Patrol says the most astoundingly racist things to you. There's a wall. There's already a wall. You can't build a wall on top of another wall. The only place that there isn't a wall is a desert. And Kentuckians just don't know. Oh, well. Sorry. So, your
Bill
bill.
reform. Yes, my bill.
Because we have 20
our
minutes
bill.
left before we have to start playing music again.
Yeah, so speaking of university processes, one of the crucial points at a university is at the universities at this time is that I think that all universities are currently looking at their student code of conducts
Yeah.
and how they deal with campus hearings where students face suspension, expulsion, or termination of their residence hall.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very pleased to say, thanks to Representative Kevin Bratcher out of Jefferson County, introduced HB 455, the Kentucky Student Administrative Rights Protection Act. Since it was filed, I think it was last Wednesday, appeared on Thursday, showed up on the record, and the 3 days it's been on the books, now 4. There's a total of 8 co-sponsors.
That's amazing, by the way. And you
A
wrote
lot
this
of
bill?
traction. This bill was has had the input of a lot of people. A lot of people, including the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which is the leading national, actively nonpartisan
Yeah.
nonprofit. And when I say actively nonpartisan, they truly, truly are actively nonpartisan. That specializes in college campus First Amendment rights and due process rights. And I think that this is what is important for people to keep in mind, is that students here, their rights, particularly when they're facing having their education opportunity taken away or at jeopardy, had very bare minimum rights, due process rights that we would be alarmed at in any other situation. And I use the phrase, for instance, termination of their resident hall. Let's call that what that is, an eviction.
Yeah, that's an eviction.
It's an eviction.
Right.
From a very expensive apartment.
From a very, very expensive apartment. And suspension and expulsion, one semester here is about $12,600.
Yeah.
So you're licensing a government agency to be able to just take away.
Yeah. Well,
And what this is a property right.
Yeah.
In Kentucky, we have deemed when you pay for an education, that is your property right.
well, $12,000 is half of the average yearly income in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so you're
That's-
giving them license
and
to
that's,
throw away half
and that's
the
if
yearly
you're
income.
in state. If you're out of state, it's twice the amount.
Oh God.
So students are facing, if you live on campus, you pay for a dining plan, and you pay for tuition and fees, you're facing $30-some thousand worth of loss by the
Right.
stroke of these campus administrative hearings.
When you have absolutely no other resources or any other way to, I mean, like, you're talking about, like, ignorance of the law is no excuse. These are kids. Like, if they haven't been taught in high school and they're not going to law school now, ignorance of the law is an excellent excuse there.
Well, these are kids that are newly thrust into
Yeah.
the full powers of their rights, and they don't know it. And I think that universities, for example, when we were dealing with First Amendment rights on campus here, that they actually exploited this particular stage of the student, that they're newly endowed into their rights. They're
Yeah.
not fully 100% known of what those rights are. And then by the time that they figured out, oh goodness, my university really screwed me over
Yeah.
and trampled my rights, they're already graduating. They can't file a case, and because it would be moot at that point.
Well, the
Right.
entire student loan industry is based on the fact that 18-year-olds have no concept of how much $10,000 is. I sure didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the process that
I'll get some coffee.
these disciplinary proceedings go by?
It's scattered.
Okay.
It's scattered all across. Each university differs, and that's part of the issue.
Right?
So there are basic levels, and from piecemeal, if you piecemeal the law, it's at best scattered. There are things like presumption of innocence.
Right?
Let's see, that's guaranteed in part to have a fair and impartial hearing. Those things.
Wait, so presumption of innocence isn't even in it?
No, it is. Those things
Okay, yeah.
are. So there are a degree of things that universities do have to follow.
I bet there are no public defenders.
No, there's not.
Is there a right to counsel?
Now, for my bill, there will be a right. For our bill, for HB 455,
Yeah.
when a student is facing expulsion, suspension, or termination of their residence hall, they will have the ability to bring their own counsel.
Yeah, one would hope. One would hope counsel would be provided. I mean, that's the enough
But that's
money
what's
that
so
would be-
alarming is
Yeah.
that. So we talked a little bit about what's already covered.
Yeah.
But what's not covered is the right to be told of your hearing in a proper amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
To be clear, they have to be told. That's already existing law.
Uh-huh.
But at what level, how many days?
Oh,
Is it 12 hours? Is
Yeah.
it 1 day? That's what's not clear.
Yeah.
And universities have pulled, well, your hearing's in 12 hours.
Yeah.
That's completely
Not
outrageous
much
and
time
unfair.
to prepare.
No.
You find Tim Pot dictators at every level.
Some
Every
universities don't allow the person to speak.
level. Uh-huh.
Well, wait a minute. That completely. I mean that eliminates their ability to defend themselves, right? Or do they do it in writing?
Now, universities like the University of Kentucky, they will allow the person to submit questions in writing.
Questions.
But when you are in real time defending yourself, especially upon the charges that the universities are required to deal with some of the most heinous stuff. They are many cities.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about plagiarism.
Yeah.
We're talking about cases of sexual assault, violent crimes, things like that.
Well, accusations.
And
of-
accusations.
Yeah, you would have some. We all know we had really weird stuff when you go into college because you have all these people that are leaving home the first time, and a lot of them
Correct.
do things that surprise even themselves.
But, and this might seem biased towards the accused, but let's talk about the accuser, the survivor in some of these cases. Can you imagine making a survivor, one, speak for themselves, but two, not allowing them to tell their story when that they're brave enough to come forward in the first place.
Yeah. And to not even hear it, that defeats the entire purpose of a trial.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it plays upon a system of privilege, because you have to think, what if it's any other situation of when you place a racial component, sexual orientation into these chairs? Are you telling me that we don't have systems of bias and injustice here on the university campuses and their little quasi-judicial systems?
Yeah, like the University of Kentucky.
We
came from
notice it in the
22nd century where
microcosm.
everything
We
was perfect,
we notice it in the macro.
Yeah.
Why does that conversation stop just because it happens past the schoolhouse gates?
Yeah.
And with most of college campuses being majority white, straight, and cisgender, you can't tell me that there's not a system of bias and injustice here as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I was in college, I ran into an RA that had serious problems with me, which were justified. But the point is, if things had stuck around a little bit longer, that could have gone very badly. It could happen to anybody, just because any human being, given any amount of power without recourse, tends to develop into something very sinister.
But that's also part of the issue, is that not being able to bring in your own counsel or somebody to speak on your behalf. I think that gives, and we talked about the transparency issue here at the university. I think that is one huge prevention method by the universities to ensure that people can't poke around into the processes.
Now, something I'm speculating here is, like, I hope it's not insulting to say to people, like, you've got a law school, you should be able to provide public defenders for everybody who's up there, because that ignores the fact that this is very serious. Losing a year of tuition, if somebody took $12,000 from you, that would be felony theft.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely worthy of every legal protection. $12,000 is not a small amount of money.
And here's the response from the universities that I've encountered, is that, Michael, this is just a school, they can go somewhere else.
Well, not if you just took all their money.
For them to sit there and say that, one, completely underappreciates what they're doing here.
Yeah.
And scoffing it off. I think that they do appreciate it, they just don't want to let on. But two, what this places survivors, students, and their families in these situations, people, poor Kentuckians particularly, that has to scrape up money and have to go through these systems and processes, I think that's an insult.
Yeah.
It's an insult to the situation, and that's an insult, honestly, to another issue, the rising cost of tuition.
Mm-hmm. And it also undercuts their entire argument that they are the essential organ of Kentucky society. If you're a Kentucky citizen...
Indispensable.
Yeah.
Indispensable.
Oh, did I say dispensable?
And so...
discretionary. It doesn't matter, but the point is, if it's in the Constitution and is there for every Kentuckian, and it certainly is, then when you're taking somebody's rights away... You can't ever just say it's not ever a casual thing. Anytime you're removing somebody's given rights.
And that's what you have to be comfortable with. Mm-hmm. People say, well, these are just students. Well, yes, but it is also a college with mostly above 18-year-olds that are dealing with property rights and taking away. And that's what you have to reconcile, is that you have a public entity taking away at least $12,000.
And what are they teaching the kids in the process? But yeah, is $12,000? That's even past small claims court, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
yeah, that's well
way
past.
above.
Yeah. There's absolutely no reason they can get away with that.
So another aspect of the bill is to allow students to participate and be present in each meaningful phase of the process. I kid you not, there's codes within the universities that they can try you without the student even being there.
Well,
no, when you say the universities, you're only talking about Kentucky universities, right? So
correct. I'm only focusing. Now, this is a national
UK, KU,
epidemic,
and
but this is only for Kentucky universities.
Do we have? It's just UK and KU, right? No, Murray's a university, right?
Yeah, Murray.
I think there's 6 of them. Six or
12.
Good to know.
12?
Yep.
12
there
universities.
Are 12 public
All right,
universities.
12, sorry.
I think that's right. Murray, NKU, U of L, University of Kentucky, EKU, Morehead State, Kentucky State, University of Louisville, and then the community college systems
Wow,
That's great.
I'm really impressed you knew that.
So
Wow.
that I counted 9.
I think WKU. I don't think I mentioned them.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we're up to 10. It doesn't matter. That's a lot more than I could. I was sitting here trying to figure out whether Center's a college. What makes a university different from a college? Out of curiosity.
Naming.
Okay.
Mostly naming.
Well, whether they offer graduate programs, right?
That too.
Okay.
For all that my life has happened within colleges, I've spent very little time in the classes. You know, I just worked here, lived here, played Dungeons and Dragons here, grew up here. I attended college I attended classes at UK for years until I graduated high school, and never again. Anyway. All right, so it's 6:37. So, gentlemen, I think you should wrap up any closing thoughts, and then we should maybe read one of the PSAs and play some music.
You want to go? All right. Well, my closing thought is check out HB 455, the Kentucky Student Administrative Rights Protection Act, to ensure that student rights are safeguarded here at the universities, and that when students who are facing some of the greatest crises of their life here on college, whether it be the accused or the accuser, there should be a fundamental basic level to protect student rights through these processes. So check it out, give your comment, and thanks for listening in.
If nothing else, the right to property. And I have to say, even as a Democrat, there's a school of just libertarian adjacent Republicans that are turning out some really good bills, and very much congratulations on your bill and on the sponsors. And I think that you've got a handle on who's good on that side, or it seems to. It seems like the same names keep coming up over and over again, and I would really hope that
it's a bill, and we all disagree on points.
Yeah.
The sponsors and I definitely do disagree on points, but there are points where that we have to come together and work on good stuff. And this is an example that I'm proud to say. Like the Campus Free Speech Act, we came together in a bipartisan effort. I'm hoping that this bill also carries the same effect, that we can come together in a bipartisan way to actually stand up for just fundamental rights that should be a bipartisan issue in the first place.
I would very much like it if your bill found a Democratic co-sponsor sometime very soon. Which reminds me, we're almost out of time, but something amazing happened yesterday that I wanted to talk about. We appear to have accidentally looped Susan Sarandon into Charles Booker's campaign. Susan Sarandon has been retweeting and following all over the place. So Kentucky suddenly, you'll see it on leftist Twitter, but leftist Twitter has a sudden love affair with the works of Susan Sarandon, and that's where it came from. She has taken an interest. We need it. I don't care what people say about, shouldn't care what movie stars think. Attention starts at the top. Attention in politics follows iron laws that you cannot change. And having a movie star come in for your candidate is absolutely one of the best things that can happen. It's amazing. I hope he capitalizes on it. I'd like to see something come out of it, but still, it's very, very nice to see out-of-state attention focused properly instead of on somebody who has an airplane. It's not people's fault. They have no choice.
Or somebody who jumps out of an airplane.
Yeah. I mean, people have no choice but to focus their attention at the top. We're seeing this all over the place with Bashir, where people are everybody's pointing out, by the way, it was a complete wipeout and the Republicans won every single race except for Bashir. But all attention focuses at the top. And if it had been flipped around, if it had been Bevin and 5 Democrats that won, then it would completely change the narrative. It's like we did an event last year when Geoff and I were running in the last race. Last year we went out to Ashland, and every single candidate was there except for the governor's candidates. Every single candidate showed up. All 15 of the people that were running for statewide office. We were all standing there remember we were sitting on that stage that it was the day that the Notre Dame burned down. We found out on stage that Notre Dame burned down. And so we're all sitting there and we all do our speeches and we all do our thing. And the newspaper guy from Ashland shows up and interviews everybody, that we're talking about the 3 candidates for the 4 candidates for Secretary of State, the 4 candidates for, 3 candidates for auditor, two candidates for Secretary of Agriculture. Everybody got interviewed, including Geoff. And the newspaper came out a couple days later, and none of us were mentioned except for Geoff. The entire article was about you and your governor's platform, which I was very happy for you, and I thought your platform was excellent, but 15 other people were there. And we literally, according to the newspaper, we actually were not there. It wasn't just that, he mentioned our names in passing. We literally were not there. As far as the newspaper was concerned, we did not exist. And this is a very local newspaper. George Soros did not tell him to do that. That was human nature. Attention concentrates at the top. And Susan Sarandon is more famous than the entire state of Kentucky put together. And if she starts slinging for Charles Booker, maybe it's a little sad, but it's going to help. All right, so in any case, this was Radio Free Eskippakithiki. Thank you very much for listening to 88.1 all the way to the left. I will read you a PSA in just a minute after I play a song.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Tuesday, February 25th. I'm Mackenzie Dixon, and you're listening to WRFL Lexington, 88.1 FM. Here's the news for this hour. President Donald Trump is on his first official state visit to India. President Donald Trump met Tuesday in New Delhi with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and expresses optimism about the eventual U.S. trade deal. AP correspondent Julie Walker has more on President Trump's actions in India.
At a Namaste Trump rally with India's Prime Minister at a huge cricket stadium that undoubtedly is the biggest audience the president has ever addressed, Trump spoke of a trade deal he's been hoping for but not gotten.
He's a very tough negotiator.
One thing he did get:
our representatives will sign deals to sell over $3 billion in the absolute finest state-of-the-art military helicopters and other equipment to the Indian Armed Forces.
And he got a lot of applause when he said the U.S. was working with India's neighbor Pakistan to crack down on militants operating on the Pakistani border. I'm Julie Walker.
The president is ending his day in India's capital by holding a solo press conference and attending an opulent state dinner. The White House has sent lawmakers to $2.5 billion urgent budget plan to address the outbreak of the coronavirus. Proactive measures are being taken as the rapid spread of the virus is spooking financial markets and restricting international travel. AP correspondent Sagar Magadi has more on the story.
The Trump administration's putting together an urgent budget request to deal with the coronavirus outbreak. The administration's already tapped into an emergency infectious disease rapid response fund and looked to transfer money from other accounts to fight the virus. A senior administration official says the White House will likely request more money this week, and while spokesman Hogan Gidley would not confirm that.
We have aggressively worked to combat the spread of this virus. Tried to prevent it as best we could from coming into this country.
House Democrats want the Health and Human Services Department to request money for speeding vaccine development, boosting lab capacity, and beefing up entry point screenings, though the White House is unlikely to approve all the money the department wants. Sagar Magani, Washington.
The virus outbreak has been credited with 1,000-plus point in the drop in the Dow Index and increasingly seen as a potential political threat for President Donald Trump. The Democratic presidential candidates will be debating for the second time in a week tonight in South Carolina. Worried Democrats are on a mission to slow frontrunner Senator Bernie Sanders. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn has more on the story.
Several of the Democratic presidential contenders are buying negative ads against Bernie Sanders as they prepare to debate tonight in South Carolina. Assuming frontrunner status, Bernie Sanders is hoping for a win Saturday in South Carolina and was already looking ahead to Texas this past weekend.
The American people are sick and tired of a government which is based on greed, corruption, and lies.
Rival Joe Biden, who's been banking on South Carolina, Pete Buttigieg, and Mike Bloomberg have bought attack ads, raising concerns the self-described Democratic socialist is tightening his grip on the nomination, but too extreme to beat President Trump. Buttigieg was met by protesters in South Carolina as he marched with fast food workers seeking higher wages, asking why he didn't march with minority constituents while mayor of South Bend, Indiana. There will be 7 candidates in tonight's televised debate. I'm Jackie Quinn.
The debate is the 10th presidential primary cycle in the final step before Super Tuesday, when 14 states and 1 U.S. territory will turn out to vote. Today in sports, every team in the men's top 10 poll has found itself in a new position from last week. The Kansas Jayhawks took over the number 1 ranking for the second time this season. The Baylor Bears fell to the second spot after a 23-winning game streak ended. Gonzaga falls to number 3, and the number 4 spot goes to San Diego State. They are all followed by Florida State, Duke, Kentucky at number 8, Maryland, and Creighton finishing off the top 10. Members of the International Olympic Committee estimate that there is a three-month window to decide the fate of the Tokyo Olympics after the Games are being threatened by the outbreak of the coronavirus. There are no delays at this time for traffic, according to the Lexington city government. Weather right now, the winds are out of the south at 10 miles per hour. The skies are overcast and the relative humidity is 93%. The current temperature is 49 degrees. I'm Mackenzie Dixon, and you're listening to WRFL Lexington, 88.1.